Yeah, my name is Idris Bello, managing partner at Lofty Inc. Capital Management, an early-stage venture capital firm that invests in tech-enabled opportunities across the continent, including prop tech. It's a pleasure being here.
Hi everyone, my name is Tola. Thank you. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Split. At Split, we're building solutions to make renting much easier for landlords, tenants, and everybody in that renting ecosystem.
Hi everyone, good day. My name is Damilola Kolawole and I do strategy, innovation, investments at Sterling Bank.
Hi, my name is Ronald Phillip. I head strategy and investment for Agility Logistics Parks, which is the largest developer of warehouse parks across the Middle East, India, and Africa. We have operations in 5 countries in Africa and will expand to 10. I also started angel investing a year back through a fund as an LP and directly in some prop tech startups.
Fantastic. So that gives you an idea of the panelists we have on stage. I would like to also get a sense of the room. So if you are a prop tech founder in the room, can you please wave your hands? Okay. If you are in investing, if you're an investor in the room, in any form of investment, prop tech, any investors in the room? Fantastic. And then if you're an operator in the real estate sector, any operators in the room? Fantastic. So this will be a very, very interesting one. I think I'm particularly excited about this panel because of the diversity. We have a venture investor, prominent one at that. We have a founder, a prop tech founder, prominent one at that. We have a traditional bank present. And we also have you're sort of a hybrid. You're an executive, angel investor, operator, all in one. So I think this must be interesting. We're talking about prop tech, partnerships, funding, scaling up. And I would like to hear your thoughts from your different perspectives, starting with the founder's perspective. I see that a lot of prop tech founders are very, very optimistic about prop tech. People are getting in, people are getting their hands dirty, and they have, this optimistic perspective. Is there a reason why you think prop tech founders should be optimistic at this time? Tola.
Hi, thanks, John. Yes, I do. And I think I'll borrow from something Kola in the last panel said. The rails have been set. So FinTech has done the good work of setting the rails because one of the biggest things in tech to build is movement of value, right? And FinTech, the likes of Paystack, Flutterwave, have been able to solve that problem and create value, immense value in that space. So even though they still think like in their spaces day one, they've built the rails on which we can now expand, right? Understand that we're, as I said earlier, we're innovating around a space and an asset that doesn't move, right? However, value has to move, right? So whatever we're building has to leverage these fintech platforms. So I think now is the time, right? And it's also evident in the funding or in the attention we're getting. Last year, Metaprop made their first investments on the continent in 2 companies. They made 2 bets from day one, and they're committing to make more bets, right? This year, we're seeing prop tech companies raise seed rounds, right? Not been done in this part of the continent, except for Egypt, actually, to date, right? So it's around that time, right? And that's how, let's think about it as Paystack and Flutterwave in 2016, right? Yeah, so we are ready.
Fantastic. That's very good to know as a founder myself. To come to Dami, just to see your perspective from a banking position. I mean, we've seen how fintech has more or less, revolutionized your space, and PropTech is now boarding. How are you positioning to either be part of this wave, a supporter of this wave, or maybe even is an obstacle, if you will? How is your bank positioning, to be part of the PropTech rise?
Okay, thanks, John. First is banking for us at Sterling has evolved, and we don't see banking as just banking. We see it as financial intermediation and provision of lifestyle solutions. And PropTech is one of those things or one of those sectors that is out to solve that problem of, in terms of real estate accessibility, funding, development, construction management, procurement, and whatever you have. But for us at Sterling, it's more of looking at how we can collaborate with PropTech founders. There's a point where you think that once a traditional bank like us comes into play, we either want to steal your idea and kick you out, or just do you dirty. But for us at Sterling, it's more about collaboration, and there are sectors or there are areas in the PropTech space that we believe that we can collaborate. The projects or products that we are working on, because first we're focused on product, we're focused on lifestyle, and we're focused on bringing that to you, the end consumer. So moving from the typical, I have deposits and I want to give you loans, but you as an individual, John, do you have a problem with financing your home? How can I step in that space for you? How can I change how you view home financing, your accessibility to that? So for us, it's about kickstarting or driving that change as an organization. We don't see ourselves as a traditional bank. We see ourselves as a financial institution that's providing lifestyle solutions to people. So, yeah.
Fantastic, and I hope the PropTech founders in the room are listening. Sterling sees themselves more than a traditional bank and are happy to, sort of find ways to collaborate and to support tech startups. And that brings me to Ronald. We talk a lot about funding. But really, are there other things that founders should be looking out for as well? We've talked about partnerships, scale-ups. Are there other things you see in your experience that are equally important to founders to look out for beyond the money, and that maybe even make them more funding ready, in your opinion?
Sure. I mean, so I wear two hats, right? I'm a real estate corporate and I'm an angel investor too. I'll maybe talk about the first one as a real estate developer. So we develop real estate across 5 African countries. We'll expand to 10. It's really hard work, right? We live by Murphy's Law every day. We have pain all the time. And I really like what Kola said, right? He said PropTech has to be a painkiller, not a vitamin, right? And God, we really need painkillers every day in what we do. Right? So, true story. I came here 3 years back to WAPI, and we were looking to invest a large amount of money in Nigeria and warehousing. We had no data. There is no information out there. So I came here and I bumped into Dolapo, who was doing data charts for the office sector. I said, Dolapo, can you do the same thing for me for warehousing? So we engaged Dolapo of Estate Intel. They mobilized a team that mapped hundreds of warehouses across Lagos for us, and they've digitized that. They've made that a dashboard. That has informed our investment choices in Lagos, where we'll have our first park, where we'll have our second park. We will invest over $100 million into Lagos. We didn't have that information. So that PropTech solution is the painkiller for that, right? So from a real estate corporate point of view, we need these painkillers. There's an opportunity for pilots across, I'd say, sales, construction, procurement. Our procurement right now, our guy uses an Excel sheet, right? Imagine how inefficient that is, right? Our construction guys, I don't know how they monitor what's going on our construction sites in Cote d'Ivoire, in Ghana, in Egypt, right? Surely there has to be technology that can be a painkiller, right? So we're happy to be, have pilots and be the first customer, right? Because it's in our own interest. Now, in many instances, if we like the thing, we will become a bigger customer. We will evangelize you to other developers because we'll share our good experience. And in many instances, we might invest and maybe even acquire a company where it makes sense. So that's from the corporate point of view. I can provide an angel investor view now or later after Idris, perhaps, yeah.
Fantastic. So if I hear you properly, you're saying that you're able to sort of incubate ideas that are painkillers to you. And so founders out here should know that, first of all, they need to look inwards to be sure that they are painkillers and not vitamins. For lack of, avoidance of doubt, painkillers are actually a need versus vitamins that are nice to have. So that's the first audit you need to do as a founder when seeking for investors' hard-earned money. Make sure you're solving a real problem. And with that, I'll come to Dr. Idris as well to talk about the investor's perspective. What are some of the things that make you interested in PropTech? You're one of the first, or at least foremost, investors in PropTech from our part of town. What are the things you look out for? What are the things that founders here should sort of optimize for as they seek to not just grow, partner, expand, but also raise funds?
Yeah, thank you. I think the first thing to realize is that the prop comes before the tech. And a lot of times, founders put up the tech and start running around. It's prop tech for a reason, right? And the tech is really an enabler. And a lot of times, people have solutions looking for problems, whereas it should be the other way around. That they understand the unique problems of the sector, find the right partners that they want to solve it for, showcase potential approaches, and then seek for funding. A lot of times, what you see is someone comes with a nice-to-have solution and seeks funding. 5 years, 3 years, a year down the line, it's dead, right? And again, when you do that repeatedly, investors start staying away because, again, the idea is this sector is not ripe, it's not ready yet for disruption or for tech enablement in a way that makes sense from an investor perspective. So I think that's the first thing. Having a deep understanding of the need within that sector, of the use cases for technology in that sector. That domain experience, I think, is very, very important. So that's the first part. Then the second one is being able to show value, right? Who needs this, right? Being able to convince the folks in the property space that this would advance their offerings, right? This would scale up what they have, or this would solve a pain for them, like Ronald was saying, right? So being able to show there's really, really a need for this. Then the third one from an investor perspective is then the issue of scale and high growth, right? There has always been property, the property sector has always existed, right? And it's always been funded mostly by banks, by individuals. But when you now bring it to the VC space, VCs are looking for high growth, they're looking for scale. And so that's their difference. So you could have a solution that makes sense, that makes money, but it's not fast growth, or it's not scalable. And VCs will most likely turn it down. It doesn't mean it doesn't solve a problem, but from a VC's perspective, it's not fast enough, it's not scalable enough. And so they say no, because there are 1,100 opportunities for them to invest money in. And so why should they put money in this? And again, in the next keynote, I was talking about one of our own failure stories, because we started actually from PropTech in 2013, right? And that's what led us investing, becoming angel investors and VCs, right? Because there's also an issue of timing there. Right? Again, Split CEO was talking earlier about it's been fintech, now it's PropTech. No matter how good the idea or the tech is, if the timing is not right, it can only just convince and burn money and it just fails. And then maybe in the future, it's also it's the right timing. Again, I think as founders, being able to understand this before you go meet investors, and also it determines the kind of investors you go to meet. Sometimes the VC is not the right investor for you. Maybe all you need is a partner, like Ronald was saying, and scale with that partner. You're solving their problems. You have the customer who's paying, and you don't need to go raise money from VCs and have the pressure on you. So you have to be sure your model is right for VCs before you go. And maybe it's angels, maybe it's PE. But I think it's important to understand the customer, the need, and then what kind of investor is appropriate for what you need to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think this is really, really, really rich. Something he said that strikes me is that it's prop before tech. And everybody should understand that it's not about just building a fancy platform. There's a lot of hard work, that goes down or behind the scenes. I think the other important thing from Ronald is that in terms of, building an idea, in terms of getting it to hit product market fit, there's actually need for partnerships with the existing real estate companies. Question for you: for some of the people that you may have incubated, were you willing to pay them Are founders supposed to be looking to be paid to do such pilots? Should they be looking to do them for free? What are your thoughts around practical ways that we can actually start to do this and come back next year with success stories?
It's a bit of a polarizing question because people have very strong views on whether it should be a paid pilot or a free pilot. My view is that if it adds value to a company, it should be a paid pilot. But for a founder, I mean, if it's a great company, a great use case, I would be willing to do it for free. Because remember, the company is investing time and giving you a shot and risking some part of their time, their thing. So they're investing something in your thing, which is, it's not kind of paid cash, but it's a big opportunity and it's their brand, etc., etc. So I think you can do both. It depends on the founder, it depends on the company. If there's obvious value, if it's a painkiller, I would imagine people would be willing to get paid for that. But I don't think it should be a deal breaker, right? Get the project, get the pilot. I mean, that's the most important thing, especially in this market. Show traction, show a customer, and once you get in, I think once the pilot phase is over, if it goes well, then real estate companies are dinosaurs. They're not going to, once they have you, once you're inside of the company, it is so hard getting inside the company. And you know this as a B2B startup. It's really tough because there are so many decision makers. There are so many people who aren't incentivized to try something new. So once you get in, and if it's a free pilot, and you do well, they're going to want to keep you and pay for you. So I said, just get in. That's the most important thing.
It makes me remember something we say, which is nobody changes a winning strategy, right? So get in and get them to win. Get your customer to win. Then they'll love you. Tola, I feel like you have some thoughts on this particular one. I'd like to hear them from a founder's perspective.
Yes, from a founder's perspective, and I had a few questions. And why did we bootstrap for 18 months and all of that stuff, right? And it really was because of this. We didn't have any other choice, right? Venture investors, which is very accurate with what he was saying. One of the first people I spoke to was Kola, and Kola made it clear to me, like, you're a great founder, but I've invested in PropTech and I've been burnt. So like I'm enjoying my fintech, B2B SaaS wave, right? That evening I just learned that because I went big fast, right? And my thing was, if I don't get Kola or Olumide, then I'm not anybody else. I'm not trying to get anybody. Well, I got one of them, right? But it still took a period of time. My point is, we did paid pilots, right? Just because we created value from day one, right? We promised these tenants that we built infrastructure for them to be able to pay their rent monthly, and we promised these landlords that most of the things that they had struggled with, tenant verification, collection of that rent, we would automate, right? They should just sit at home and wait for their money. So when landlord one sat at home and was receiving his money every month, right? He actually bought 2 more homes, right? And was like, brought his cousin, his friend, and was like, see, this thing works. So speaking to what Ronald says, like, they would be your advocate if it works. But I think the misconception most of the time is that founders think that people owe them stuff. Nobody owes you anything. Like, VCs don't owe you anything. Potential customers don't owe you anything. Businesses like yours don't owe you the pilot. So recognize that it's difficult to get in, but that if you create value when you get in, there's almost no way you can fail, right? At doing that. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Nobody owes you anything. That's deep. And I think that's one thing that founders need to know early. I think another important thing that I pick out of this is the fact that, we're in an industry that doesn't need, fancy advertising. What it needs is hard user stories. People actually saying, I use this product and this is my result. So as founders, I hope we're all hearing, we really need to get into the trenches, get that work done, and generate those user stories, and then we'll probably attract more of the things that we want. But it brings me to a question for you, Dami. I know that banks are big on risk, right? And we're talking about partnerships. You have a name to protect. Most banks have been, decades and decades, in existence. Nobody wants to be the first to soil the name. What are some of the things that you think our founders should look for or work towards before approaching you for partnership? I know Sterling has partnered with a couple of, startups. Maybe you can give us a few case studies and why you did those deals and some of the things that, founders need to look at to be more interesting, to be able to get, the right partnerships. Speaking for Construct, just talking about, our alliance with you guys gave us a lot of credibility, A lot of the foreign venture funds came in because of our alliance with you. And that is a good model for other founders here. But what are the things that maybe we did right, other people did right, or that you look out for, when looking to partner with companies?
I would say, speaking to founder quality, has to do with the integrity of the founders. It's very key for us. It's something that we look out for because we don't want to back individuals who end up going into the market. Because for us, how we collaborate goes beyond, we work with, for example, Construct, and these guys are doing a great job. But because of our customer base, we are able to channel these startups into just funnel that entire product through our customer base. So we have individuals in the real estate sector who play in the different areas of the entire value chain. We're able to do those forms of introductions to ensure that, okay, even though we as a business, because we have our properties and we build our branches, we're able to utilize these services. But how are we able to also drive that growth for the startups through our entire customers or client base, right? That's very important for us. How strong are you? How strong is your character? I think that's the major thing for us. Your person is of utmost importance. You might not have a great product. We could help you fine-tune that because at Sterling, what we do is we look at the entire chain of what you're doing. We do SaaS, and we're able to provide what you need. All you can come to us with is, okay, I have this particular thing. I have built it to this extent. How can you enable me? What plugins can you give to me? Outside of technology, but in terms of people, in terms of market, in terms of clients, in terms of advisory services, in terms of financing, it goes across. But for us to be able to do that, we need to trust you. Yeah.
Can I
Please,
just interrupt?
please,
Because
please
it's an
jump in.
important
Love it.
question for both you and for Idris. This integrity test is really important, right? Especially in this kind of stark funding environment. How do you do the integrity check on founders? How do you do it? I'm very curious.
I would give a very interesting example. Let me go first, please. We were about to carry out a transaction with a particular founder, I wouldn't mention, but I was just having a random chat with someone. Oh, I know this guy, this, they approached us. What do you think? We're like, don't try it. You're going to lose your money. Your credibility is going to be at stake. So we do a lot of due diligence outside of the typical paperwork because we know that going into the street to find information about you is very key. So you might have the clean paperwork, you might have every single thing, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, but what does your former business partner have to say about you? What does the guy who you went to school with have to say about you? What does your girlfriend have to say about you?
Super valuable.
So we do those checks to the bits. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he just touched on it. So when we do our due diligence, we have something we call the angry ex-girlfriend test. Right? If we can get your ex-girlfriend to still say something good about you, maybe there's something there. Right? But it's true because again, there isn't enough data when you're doing due diligence on founders. So a lot of what we do is actually social engineering, right? We're looking through your LinkedIn and saying who knows you, who have you interacted with in school, partners, co-founders in a previous startup that went bust, banks that you've dealt with, where have you worked, and we actually find that. Also because we have a large LP investor network, we're actually circulating and saying who knows this guy. And a lot of times, like I said, you almost close and then something comes up and says, you know what? Sometimes it's even from a bank that they've used. And you'll be like, yeah, we did this deal with them, but don't touch them, right? Because X, Y, Z happened. So actually we go there. Again, we still make mistakes. And you probably saw some of this in the news where, you still go against your gut feel. But a lot of times you find out you should have just, when you say red flag, just stop, right? So a lot of it is actually social engineering. It's sometimes going through your tweets, right? I'm serious. Again, you're investing in other people's money, right? You're saying, okay, what are they saying? What's their behavior? What's out there about them, right? And we actually tell them, we're going to ask people. If you co-founded the startup before, we're going to ask what happened in that startup. And even from talking to you, right, it's not even about you having failed before the startup. It's about what story are you telling about that failure? Are you owning responsibility, or are you putting it all on your co-founders? And that kind of gives us an insight into what could happen next time. So it's about your past relationships and how you've handled them. Yeah.
You want to say something? Please go ahead.
An interesting example would also be, for example, if you say you're a Christian or a Muslim, I mean, we can, fix a meeting on a Sunday to see you with your family. Maybe, are you going to lie? Where we ask you questions, just things like that. I mean, for example, Construct, we know your strong ties, right, for both of you. So you may know, might not know, but we know strong ties about you. So, yeah. Yeah,
the other thing is also about the claims. So when you see a deck, the founder puts in there and says he has 3-4 investors already. He doesn't realize that the investors talk to each other. So I call caller and says, have you invested in this guy? And he says, no, he's not invested. They're talking to me, but I'm not invested. So why are you claiming? Or you say, Sterling, as always, I already agreed to do a pilot with you. Well, I call the CFO of Sterling, who's probably one of my investors, and says, Oga, is it true that you're doing a pilot with us? And he says, no, we've never seen them before. And these are real stories, right? There's almost no bank that you claim there that we don't have an investor from. And they will go in and ask. Or you say you have this license with Central Bank. We called someone at Central Bank and said, is it true they have this license? And we say, well, they just applied, they've not been approved. Then why are you faking it? I'm serious, those are flags, right? Because again, it tells us what are you going to say or do in the future. So be plain, be open, be very clear about where you are in the process. You're speaking to 5 investors, they've not agreed yet, that's fine. Don't claim you already signed them up. Because a lot of people play that games. So they tell caller they've signed up with Idris, they tell Idris they signed up Maya, and they go around. But we talk to each other, we have WhatsApp groups, right? And we also have groups where you actually say that founder, don't touch them. Because again, they've done X, Y, Z. Because founders also forget it's a small world, like you say, right? Someone, I've seen folks take $10,000, very small money, right? And then run away with it or misbehave. And then they come in another year and go to a different VC. There's a high chance, we're talking to each other and we know, what's going on. Yeah.
Wow, that's funny, but not funny. Let's put our hands together for these panelists. I think if you're a founder here, you don't need lunch. I'm sure you feel full. I feel full. And I'm also happy to say that myself and my co-founder have passed the angry girlfriend test. Oh my goodness. And true story, I walked into a room looking for my first, few millions of naira for Construct, and the guy sitting at the head of the table was my neighbor for 7 years. And I remember in those years, there would be times when, because our fences were so close, my wife's friends would sometimes park in front of his compound. I would take the key, go and move the car for them, to my side, because they couldn't tell the difference. So we never had an issue. Imagine if I was blocking his gate, guys. So I think one of the things we should take away from here is that integrity is key. As founders, we need to think about the greatness of what we're building versus how our body is doing us. When we want to get upset, when we want to do certain things, and remember that we are ambassadors of our startups first. And if we want VCs, angel investors, to become co-ambassadors with us, then we should make sure that we're in a place where they will be proud, to be. I can take a few questions from the audience, maybe two. I wanted to just take one more from Idris, if you don't mind. And that's around founder types. I know that you've invested in different parts of Africa. Do you see the same trends? Do you see the same behavioral traits? Do you think founders in Nigeria are more resilient like we claim or think we are? Do you think founders in Egypt are smarter than us? What do you see? And if you've invested across continents as well, what do you see as the difference in sort of like founders across the space?
This guy wants to get me into trouble. So we invested in 13 African countries. Well, I'll speak about a few. Right? I don't think it's about being smarter. It's about the different challenges and opportunities. So for instance, when I say, when we look at founders in Nigeria, they are mostly fresh out of school. Very inexperienced, but a lot of hustle, right? Very determined. When we look at Egypt, they are more experienced. They've worked in one or two banks or companies, and then they found a problem that they want to solve, right? So again, the way they approach it is different. When you go to Kenya, it's even a different story, right? It's more laid back. It's more, firstly, there's a disproportionate amount of non-local founders in Kenya, and even among those who are there, a lot of times it's also about nice to haves and a few things they're solving and things like that compared to, and the analogy I give is this: when I look at Nigeria versus, for instance, Kenya, I say look at Kenya sometimes, and again I'm going to get in trouble next time I go to Nairobi. When I look at some of the things that are being built or the founders, I say Nairobi is a very nice place to live if you've been there compared to Lagos. Right? Lagos is terrible to live in, right? So now, when you look at Kenyan founders, so I look at the ecosystem and I say, imagine a boat that's sailing on water. It has a roof, and there are, like holes in the roof. And so you as a founder, you're trying to plug the holes in the roof so it doesn't rain in and, get moppy. And so you see that attitude, right? When you look at Nigeria, imagine the same boat. First, there's no roof. There's no roof. It's raining, and there are holes in the boats. So it's survival. It's not a nice to have. And so you see that hustle come out in the founders. Not because they're necessarily smarter, but they have no choice. I look at Egypt, for instance. We do more of logistics in Egypt than in sub-Saharan Africa. And people ask why. I say if a logistics founder or supply chain founder in Egypt trying to build a startup that goes from B to C, most likely you do B to D, right? B to C is your core, but you do B to D. If you try to do something in Nigeria, you do A to Z. You have to build this one and do this one and settle the police and do the insurance and do the regulator and do the government before you even focus on your business. And there are moneyless outside too, doing stuff. Things that you cannot even put on your balance sheet. Right? You're doing prop tech. How do you explain the moneyless that come daily or at every level of the building? Right? How do you explain that to a foreign investor? So it makes it more challenging. So it's not necessarily that founders are better or worse. It's just the environment in which they deal with. And I remember, so folks like Split and the similar startups, one of the first questions I asked when I look at that is, great, did this make sense? But then demand is not even the issue, supply. That was the question I asked. Supply. It gets to a point, if you don't have enough supply of houses that are willing to come on your platform, you're either building yourself or it gets stunted, right? And those are challenges you face in this market. And I'm glad they're finding ways around that.
Fantastic. I think it's been a very engaging session. We can now take one question from the audience. And I will pose a challenge to you. When you ask your question, you should also tell us what you intend to do differently after the panel. So we have one hand up there. We have two. I'll let you decide.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Matthias. I'm the creative director at Ajet Designs. We are into interior designs and furnitures. And it's been a very, very wonderful session, I must say. Thank you very much, everyone on this panel. Yes, I have a question for the founders and for the investors. I'm actually working on solving the problem. Actually, this is a strong headache. I work with artisans, and everybody knows artisans are a big headache across the industry. Now, one thing that has laid me back is I don't want an idea when I start. You just tell me it's trash. But when you see Liveland, they are doing they are doing something unique. Something unique that's also a very big headache in the real estate space. And this is where I'm coming in from the interior aspect and furniture aspect. So what is that unique thing you feel as a VC I need to do? And as a founder, how do you able to scale up this idea? Trust me, it's mind-blowing. When I say Liveland, I start thinking like, this is a traditional business that you've taken into the tech space. Trust me, like this is mind-blowing. Because I had somebody contact me from the US that he wants me to finish his house. Probably he has been talking to his family members. When he got to me, he was like, why is it so expensive to build or finish a house in Nigeria? So what is that unique thing you are looking at as a VC and as a founder? How were you able to, upscale from this traditional stuff to the tech space? Thank you very much.
Sorry, so to answer you, I would ask a question. Is it a painkiller or a vitamin? Right. Think about that. Like, it's not for you to respond now, but think about that clearly. Like, and think about it from the people you are trying to solve their problem. Right. Is it clearly a painkiller for them, or is it just a vitamin for them? Because I can tell you, for instance, people would say fundraising. Let's glamorize fundraising. People would say, "Oh, this startup raised this startup raised that," but they don't understand that a founder in 6 months spoke to 255 people and got 19 yeses, right? So before you start or embark on any journey, ask yourself, would I do this thing without this VC's help? Would I do this thing without any funding help? Is this thing absolutely a painkiller, like Ronald said, right? Or is it a vitamin that if I did it and I didn't have any VC help, there's no way that this thing is going to go to market anyway, right? I'll just be complaining to myself. So I think I would answer that with that question, right? Think about it. Is it a painkiller or a vitamin?
Okay, so let me take it from there. And it's not enough for it to be a painkiller. It could be a painkiller, but the people you want to serve, can they afford the painkiller? So you say, yes, there are not people who are sick here, so it's a painkiller, right? They have a headache. You go and set up a hospital. But instead, they go and buy ibojedi, right, on the side. They go and buy something from the local pharmacy because they can't afford your offering. Or they don't think it's enough. They have other priorities to spend money on versus your own painkiller. So it's a pain for them, right? But maybe there are other pains in their life that are bigger than the pain you're trying to solve. Or you find only a few people who can pay for that painkiller. So yes, it's a painkiller you're offering, but you don't have the mass of people to afford that. And I'll give you an example, and I'll speak more about that in my keynote. Look at the issue of finding house in Lagos. If you're just moving into Lagos and you need to rent an apartment, right? It's difficult. So it's a pain, very big pain. But do you know how many startups have failed, even with VC money, to solve that problem in Lagos? And it's not from the absence of not having solutions. But again, it's also about the people you want to serve. Can they afford it? What are their alternatives that still work for them in one way or the other? And how do you disrupt that? Or how do you enable that? And be able to find enough of a mass that makes it make sense. So I think that's the other thing you have to look at. It may be a nice thing you're doing, but if you can't find enough people who are going to pay for it, maybe go find a job.
Wow. I would say I'm very honored to have moderated this panel. It's clearly the most engaging so far. Thank you so much to the fantastic panelists who have brought a wealth of knowledge to us. And feel free to continue to engage them when we have lunch and at different times to answer more of your questions. Thank you so much to the organizers of this for this very engaging panel. So I think we will take a picture. Yeah, I like pictures. Yes.